Welcome to Restoration. I'm Rabbi Mac. So glad you could join us on this online Shabbat. We have made it, my friends, to the last level of Jumanji. It is the end of December of 2020. And next year, it's funny how calendars work, because there's really no difference in the world between the last day of December and the first day of January. But we're still going to celebrate because we've come to an end of a season, and a new season is going to come in January 1st. I know it's not the Jewish calendar. It's a different calendar. We already celebrated our New Year. We're in the 80s, which is a much better decade than this has been on the Jewish calendar. But we're going to celebrate nonetheless. For those who celebrated Hanukkah earlier this month and those who celebrated Christmas yesterday to the celebration of New Year's, there's a lot to celebrate, even in the midst, even in pandemic. And though we have not been able to meet together, and honestly, we're not sure how much longer that this is going to go on. I think into January, we're going to continue to not meet live and hope that things improve so that we can meet together when the time comes. But in the meantime, we continue to prayerfully consider these messages and series, and we are starting a new series next week for the start of 2021. Called Completely Other, that I'll talk a little bit more about at the end of this message. And we're finishing our series today, Prepare for More, and the last of the 6 core values. And if you don't know, we're supported by tithes and offerings, and you can give on our Restoration app or shalomseattle.com. And as we've been saying for most of this year, we have a Helping Others Fund, which we've really had people have given to tremendously, and we've really been able to help a lot of people here in Seattle, both in our community and some outside of our community, that have been struggling because of the things that are happening during this pandemic in the world that we live in. So if you're able to, we want to encourage you to give also, those who are members and regular tenders above your tithe, to the Helping Others Fund, so we can continue to do that. Help people into 2021. So today is the last message in the series, Prepare for More, and the last core value is simply stated: we're better together. Because we are better together. In fact, I realized as we were preaching through these series that our 6 core values are actually progressive and sequential, meaning they kind of happen in order, right? We focus on reflecting the Jewishness of Yeshua, and that helps us to understand our identity and family, where Ibars gave a great message on family earlier in this series. And then Matt Giles spoke about what it means to be forgiven, because when you understand the Jewishness of Jesus and you understand your role in family as Jews and Gentiles, and then you understand that you're forgiven, that you can live forgiveness out, and that makes you more generous, where Ibars talked about what it means to be generous, and then Justin Gloyd talked about what it means to be servants, because when we're generous with our resources, it makes us want to serve others in different ways, and with our time and our talents, not just our treasure, and all of that makes us better together. So they're sequential, and they kind of go in order, one step at a time. And we say often at Restoration, because it's one of our core values, that we're better together, which the opposite of that means you're worse alone. And people, specifically in this season of pandemic and COVID, I know many of you feel alone. Not just those who are not married and have a family. Although I know those of you there are many of you who are single and feel alone, but there are many people in our community who have families and also feel alone just because of these stay-at-home orders that we've experienced and the isolation that we experience and the not gathering together. And in fact, it's the reason why by design in the scriptures we're supposed to gather together on Shabbat anyway. Because it's a way for us to connect with each other, and not just connect together physically as we've not been able to now for 10 months, which is crazy and unimaginable. I don't think any of us ever imagined that things would go on this long. But if we've learned anything in this pandemic, it's that we need other people. That it's not enough to just have our little family or the people, that small people that we're a small group of people that we're close with, but we need a bigger network. It's the reason why we have connect groups that on Zoom, and I know because people say, we all say, I hate Zoom. But I was looking at my notes actually. The last time I preached this message was a year ago, and I had Skype in there, and then it changed to Zoom because now we all use Zoom. We should have bought stock in Zoom. But in all the frustrations of using a network like that, like in every Zoom conversation you hear, you're on mute. I can't hear you. You got to take it off mute. No, you're not. Or the moments where you're talking with somebody on Zoom and a kid screams like somebody's just been murdered and they have to leave the screen. And, there's all kinds of things, but you also have to consider that in times past, they didn't have the technology we have, and that there's actually a blessing in the technology because we can continue to live life together. And I just for context, I know I want you to understand that this idea of being better together is so important to me personally that I talk with two of my best friends once a week, very intentionally. I have elders meetings with our elders every Monday night. I have conversations with mentors every other week or once a month with other pastors. I go to weekly counseling. I'm part of the Connect group that I'm a part of is our elders meeting, and I'm in pastors networks because I just need other people. I'm an extrovert. And I think the pandemic has actually in some ways been harder on extroverts because we don't have the people that we normally have. But you have to make space in your life, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, to intentionally invite others into your life, especially in this season where we're not able to meet together as we normally would have, which is kind of why I like it. Because I think sometimes we have to come out of our context, our normal rhythms and our normal context to realize what we should have realized before. Of course, meeting together once a week didn't solve anything. Of course, meeting together once a week for a service didn't meet all of our needs. We never believed that. But we do believe that the more you connect with others and the more the less you're alone and the more you're together, the better it is for us. And in 2020, as this is the last weekend of December going into a new year, and our budget, our fiscal year for restoration goes January to the end of December, I have to tell you that this has been our best year ever. 2020 is the best financial year that our community has had in the 10 years that I have led this community. And beyond just the regular tithes and offerings and the regular giving, we've had churches and other partners give into the things that are happening here because they believe that what we are doing is good soil for the kingdom of God. And that means so much to me. And it's why we have our Helping Others Fund. It's why we give locally to places like Seattle Children's Hospital and Seattle Union Gospel Mission and Mary's Place and the Pregnancy Resource Center. It's why we give to the Hatikva Dental Clinic and the project that Ibar's introduced us to, the at-home the new home for at-risk kids in Israel. It's why we help other congregations through crisis, like our friends at Congregation Mayim Chaim in Alabama, whose building was destroyed during a hurricane. And we were able to give them money to meet their deductible so that insurance can pay for the rest. It's why we financially support 2 church plants in our city that are like 15 minutes from us. Because we don't believe that everyone belongs at Restoration, but we do believe that everyone belongs in the family of God. And we want to support these other leaders and these other communities that are simply trying to do the same thing we're doing, which is lead people to become fully devoted followers of Yeshua. It's why so many of our leaders and members of our community have gone to Africa with Jewish Voice Ministries to help meet people's physical needs so that we can also meet their spiritual needs. It's why I'm so happy to have not preached this series, Prepare for More, myself. But other leaders in our community have given exceptional messages. Rabbi Ibar's 2 messages, and Matt Guile and Justin Gloyd, because we're better together. This is not just my thoughts and my ideas that I hope you're going to follow. It's a group of leaders together who try to prayerfully consider how to actually live the things that God has called us to live as a community. It's why our little synagogue in Seattle has an audience 10 times bigger than the people who actually meet when we used to meet through our app, our website, and YouTube. It's why I'm hoping that my upcoming book in 2021, Jesus Never Said Anything New, will find an even wider audience. Because as Ibar's in his generosity message and Justin in his servant message reminded us, what we have and what we do is not only about us. It's about the God we serve, and it's about leading people to become fully devoted followers of Yeshua. We are better together. We're also worse alone. So don't be alone. And if you are alone, would you allow us to show you the way home? We want to invite you to find your place in the family of God, not just to become a member here or to connect with what we're doing or to even just to give into what we're doing. But if Restoration isn't the right place for you, we would love to help you find the right place for you. There's so many congregations and churches that are all that we count as partners because we all have the same goal in mind: to be more like Yeshua, to live our lives according to what he actually taught us to do and what we believe we're supposed to do. It's why the arrows of our logo for our synagogue, there's 6 arrows and 6 core values. It's why they point in, because the work of restoration is supposed to happen internally and personally, while God at the same time uses us to lead others through the same restoration. It's not that God wants to restore you first so that you can be a person that restores others. No, in the middle of you being restored and you finding healing that you need, he wants to also use us at the same time to lead others. It's a poem I wrote at the beginning of December before a counseling session. And as now in about a year and a half of counseling, I've been experiencing God healing me internally from very old issues from when I was a kid, in the issues in my heart and my mind and my body. And it's been so exhausting and frustrating and been such hard work to actually dig into the depths of why I act the way that I do, and why I do the things that I do, why I think the way that I think, why I feel the things that I feel. And on my way to counseling, I noticed it was a beautifully sunny day. Doesn't happen often this time of year in Seattle. And the mountain was out. Now, I got to tell you, before I read this poem, and we'll put it on the screen as well, but before I moved here, I had never heard this term, the mountain is out. Because mountains don't move. But in Seattle, there's mountains actually all around Seattle. And Mount Rainier is 14,500 feet, and it hovers. It's a 2-hour drive, between an hour and a half and a 2-hour drive from where we are in Seattle to the mountain. but it seems like it's much closer because it hovers over the city. And when the clouds move and you see the mountain again, all our local stations in Seattle will say the mountain's out today, like the mountain is the sun, because it comes out from behind the clouds, but it doesn't actually move. Clouds just move, and we can see it. So that's some of the context of my very Seattle poem, what I want to read to you. Thank God, because today the sun was shining and the mountain was out in all of its glory, unmoved by the world around it and in the chaos of this year. It stands above with the snow-capped peak, as it always does, but we can't always see it because it's hidden behind the clouds. In the words of the great Lamb song, as the mountains, which later in life turned out to be Psalm 125, verse 2, as the mountains are around Jerusalem, the Lord is all around his people, and we shall not be moved. But Yeshua said, Amen, I tell you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Like the mountain, God is not moved, nor are we, his people, even under the under the cover of clouds, like a pandemic. And at the same time, God is moving mountains in our lives that block us, individually and corporately, from seeing, hearing, and experiencing his tangible presence. So while God is not moved, nor are we, his people, even under the cover of clouds like a pandemic, at the same time, the mountains are moving so that you, I, we, can more clearly see just how clearly God sees you, me, us. Mountains are moving so that you, I, we can more clearly see him in all of his glory. Thank God, because today the sun was shining. And the mountain is out in all of its glory. As we've been going through this series, we've been talking about what it means to prepare for more, and that we don't entirely know what it means. Our friend Pastor Tim Ross preached a series that spoke to me deeply at his church, Embassy City Church, called Prepare for More. And it was a word that the Lord gave him that as he was preaching, I felt was for us as well. And as we prepare for more, we are better together. See, when we developed these core values almost 7 years ago, came up with our mission and lead people to become fully devoted followers of Yeshua, and 6 core values that would become our grid, that we would put everything through that we do to guide us in the things that we think God wants us to be. It was a hope. When I first started preaching these things, it was, this is what we need to be. And then after a few years of people gathering together to understand and push through and learn together, we actually started living it out. And we were seeing these things play out in different people's lives. And then there were a few years where we preached it like, well, we're doing it, and it's amazing, and it's actually starting to work, and there's excitement. And now we're in a season where we're pressing in to the things that make us unique as a community, because God is preparing us for more in our families, in our marriages, with our children, and with each other, and to see people who are far from God draw near to God, and to see people who already know God to grow deeper in their relationship with him. And it's exciting. And I got to tell you, because I've been doing this my whole life. I've been in congregations since I was 5 weeks old. I was born in Ashland, Oregon, and my family moved to Philadelphia to be part of a congregation when I was 5 weeks old. And we've been through a variety of congregations since, and my parents planted their congregation when I was 10 years old. And I led a congregation in Maryland before I came out to Seattle. And when I came out to Seattle, this was all things that God was birthing in my heart for this moment and this time. And I am so grateful that I actually like the people I worship God with. I am so grateful for so many of you in our community who are living these things out, not because I convinced you to live these things out, but because God has spoken to your hearts and to your minds, and has united us together, that even in a pandemic, I mean, guys, I can't even express to you. When all of this started to go down in March, the hope was, gosh, I hope people keep giving. And it's been way beyond that. It's not just that people continue to give, it's that so many of you have cared for each other and had concern for each other and supported each other and have loved each other and have found ways to gather in small groups and found ways to connect over Zoom and found ways to pour into our Helping Others fund so that we could provide for the needs of so many people. And it's not just me, and it's not just Rabbi Ibars, and it's not just our leaders, our board, who I'm so grateful for, Ibars and Kelly, and Isaac Dioria, and Justin Gloyd, and Matt Guile for the sacrifices that they make to be a part of our community and to invest in our community. And there's so many group leaders and there's so many people that do so many things to care for each other. I have received no messages in all the 1,000 ways you can message me of people saying nobody was with me or supported me. In fact, I've gotten the very opposite, where people are saying, I got a cancer diagnosis and I didn't know what to do, but my Connect group prayed with me and they walked me through it, and I got this, and I lost this family member, I lost this job, but the people around me that are a part of our community stepped up and encouraged. And I want to say too, if you are a person who's watching and you feel disconnected and you have nobody, don't sit and wait for us to reach out. Let us know. Because we want to love you and we want to support you and we want to encourage you so you can find the kind of community that we have found with each other. I've had people in our community reach out to me and just ask me how I am. And it means so much to me that so many of you are praying for me and praying for Ibars and praying for our leaders as we try to weigh our responsibility to gather together, that we have to gather together, and a responsibility that we have to care for people, and how all of that pressure, like none of these decisions are easy. But I've been so encouraged because so many of you have been praying for us and continue to pray for us. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 7 says, "But to each one of us, grace was given in keeping with the measure of Messiah's gift." And there's a personal sphere of grace that happens that Paul is talking about. That God gives us a grace. He gives us confidence in his grace to live out the special measure of grace that he gives to us. The way Paul starts the letter in Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 1, he lays out who he is. He says, Paul, an emissary of Messiah Yeshua, by God's will, to God's holy people in Ephesus, those trusting in Messiah Yeshua. So the breakdown is, Paul, this is who I am. An emissary, this is what I do. Of Messiah Yeshua, this is who I do it for. By God's will, this is my authority. And to the holy people, the Kedoshim in Ephesus, this is my audience. And there's a living out of my special measure of grace that if I were to break it down the same way, I could say it this way. Matt is who I am. A rabbi is what I do. Of Messiah Yeshua, this is who I do it for. And by God's will, this is the authority that God has given me. And to people who are far from God and people who want to become more fully devoted to Yeshua, that's my audience. And as we prepare for more, because we're better together, it's not just about having your individual sphere of grace, but also this corporate sphere of grace that God calls us to live out together, as we've been talking about through this whole series on what makes our community, Restoration, unique. The restoration, this is who we are. A synagogue, this is what we do, which synagogue is actually a Greek word that just means like church, just means assembly together. Messianic, this is who we do it for, people who follow Yeshua. And by God's will, this is our authority. And to Seattle and way beyond Seattle, this is our audience. And as we live out this special measure of grace, it's really what Paul means when he says to live a life worthy of the calling that you've received in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 1. 25 years ago in a class in college, my professor, I was taking a class called the Prison Epistles, which are the letters that Paul wrote while he was in house prison, which in December of last year, my brother got married in Italy. We had an opportunity to go to Rome, and randomly walking down the street, we turned into this church, and the lady said she was standing there like taking money, €2 to go down the steps. And I said, what's down the steps? And she said, this is, in church history, this is the place where Paul was under house arrest. And they believe, in their tradition, they believe that it was Luke's house who wrote the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts, and that he was under house arrest in Luke's house, which they built a church on top of, because he built a church on top of everything in the 300s. And I went down into this space, and I sat in the space where Paul wrote these letters. And I could only imagine what it meant to him to sit in this room and to have people come and visit him and share the gospel and pray for people and send out these letters. And he said in Ephesians 4 and verse 1, he said, therefore, I, a prisoner for the Lord, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you were called. He continues in verse 2, and he says, with complete humility and gentleness, with patience, putting up with one another in love, making every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. There's one body and there's one Spirit, just as you were called in the hope of your calling, one Lord, one faith, one immersion, one God, and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But to each one of us, verse I started with at the beginning, to each one of us, grace was given in keeping with the measure of Messiah's gift. See, humility is a modest or low view of one's own importance. And it's why Paul says you should put up with one another in love. The most frustrating person in your life. Well, the truth is you're the most frustrating person in somebody else's life. And we are called as brothers and sisters in Messiah. And those of you who are not believers in Yeshua yet, you are called to come on home and come to the family and join in all the things that God has given us. That we're to keep unity together. That we're supposed to support each other and encourage each other in the bond of shalom, in the bond of peace and grace, keeping with the measure of Messiah's gift. I keep going back to a message I preached, the last message of the Wisdom series I did a few weeks back, where we talked about this idea that everything is like smoke. It's like vapor. It all disappears. And all through the book of Ecclesiastes, which generally I've always heard and understood as a very depressing book, it is actually exciting because what he's saying is because it's all just going to disappear. Like the length of somebody's life, no matter how short or long their life is, it's like a vapor. It's smoke. It comes and it goes. We won't even be remembered after 3 generations beyond. Like I know my grandparents. I knew my grandparents. I heard stories about their parents from my mom. And the generation before that, I know their names. And that's it. And the truth is, if the Lord doesn't come back between now and then, we won't really be remembered either. And that could be depressing. Or it could cause us to actually enjoy the things that God has given us. Whether you're single and without family, but the only thing that's going to make you happy is a family, then you're going to have to find contentment in being single. For those of us who have a family and wish we were single, like God has called us to enjoy what he gives us, what's been given to us. Because it's a vapor, it's all going to disappear. And in it disappearing, he calls us to enjoy ourselves. Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, he says, enjoy, drink, and eat good food, and love the wife of your youth in all of your fleeting days. Because they're all fleeting and they're all going to disappear. So enjoy it because it's all a gift. And God has given each of us a personal sphere of grace. And then together he gives us this corporate sphere of grace that you and I have been given all of these gifts from God to share with everybody around us. Ephesians 4 verse 11, Paul writes, he himself gave some to be emissaries and some as prophets and some as proclaimers of the good news and some as shepherds and teachers to equip the people for the work of service, for building up the body of Messiah. For him, the whole body is fitted and held together by every supporting ligament, and the proper working of each individual part produces the body's growth for the building itself up in love. Because we're better together. The design is not for you to do anything alone. The design is not for you to do the work by pulling up your bootstraps and making things happen for yourself. The design is for you to invest and invite. The design is for you to encourage others to come be a part of a family that you didn't even know you had until you came, participated, and jumped in and gave of your time and your talents and your treasures and everything that God has given us, good and bad, that he gives us to see, feel, and enjoy what God is doing, even in a pandemic. The truth is, mountains are moving, even when you can't see them because of the clouds that are in front of them. And God telling us, prepare for more. And we've said all through, we don't know exactly what that means, except as we move into a new year on our calendar, that as difficult as this year has been, and difficulties that will continue in the first part of 2021, that God's not surprised, that God is not moved, that God is not, oh man, I did not plan for this one, but that he stands with this sphere of grace that he's given you as an individual, that you bring to the sphere of grace that God gives to us as a community, so that we together can lead people to become fully devoted followers of Yeshua. As I said at the beginning of this message, in January I'm starting a new series as we have been preparing for more. I'm going to start a series called Completely Other. Because when God commanded Israel these words in Leviticus, he said, "Be holy, for I am holy." But in Hebrew, the word holy doesn't actually mean holy. Kadosh means completely other. And so God was telling the nation of Israel, be completely other, for I am completely other. And I want to invite you to invite others on the Restoration app or YouTube or Facebook, however, Instagram, however you connect with our ministry, to encourage people to watch our next series, Completely Other, that will start in 2021. And sometime in 2021, we will be able to gather together again. And we're going to have huge celebrations, and we're going to have tons of food, and there's going to be tons of joy. And the people that during this pandemic that you said, when this is all over, you got to come to synagogue with me. You got to come to my congregation with me. You got to come, because all the emptiness that we felt for all of this time during this pandemic, we can fill that emptiness with the thing that's actually designed by God for you to fill it with, which is other people. That we would find that we're worse alone, but we're better together. I love you so much, and I've missed seeing so many of the faces that I love to see in person, and I know we're coming to a day when we're going to be able to do that again. But in the meantime, as this pandemic continues and our God is not moved and we are not moved as his people, may God move the mountains in my life and in your life that are keeping us from being better together. In Yeshua's name. See you next year. See you in 2021.